Greetings, I'm Bill Kladke, and I'd like to welcome you to today's edition of Neighborhood Beat. Our guest today is Mr. Neil Bergsman, who's director of the Maryland Budget and Tax Policy Institute. And Neil's here today to talk to us about Maryland's budget and how it affects you. So Neil, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here, Bill.
Oh, thank you so much for coming. I know you're busy, and I appreciate you coming. First of all, could you tell us a little bit about the Maryland Budget and Tax Policy Institute?
Sure. The Maryland Budget and Tax Policy Institute is a little public policy research center that focuses on the state's budget and the state programs, especially as they affect low-income and moderate-income Marylanders. So we do research that you can find on our website. We give presentations to different community groups explaining about the state budget and the state budget process and why it's important to average people. And we work with other advocacy groups in the community to help influence budget decisions and legislation to help people that maybe don't have as strong a voice in Annapolis without us.
That's quite an agenda. What's your background and experience?
So I worked in state government in finance for 23 years, most of that time in the governor's budget office. I worked for Governor Schaefer, Governor Glendening, Governor Ehrlich, and a short period of time in the O'Malley administration. And I've worked on multiple aspects of the budget as well as agency finance. So I know a lot of the things that are in the budget. I've helped all those governors to cut the budget, so I know what's in there, and I understand why it's important and how it affects people and communities in their day-to-day lives.
Yeah, that's very important. So you've really been a nonpartisan for most of your working life.
Yes, and our institute, we certainly have a point of view. We are interested in helping low-income, moderate-income, and other vulnerable Marylanders, but we are nonpartisan and we don't get involved in any election-type issues.
Yeah, and you're driven by the data. You're not really driven by your bias as much as by the data that's there.
Well, I say that our job is to be objective but not necessarily neutral. So we are bound by the data and reality. When you see a fact or a number in one of our reports, you can take that to the bank. But we are looking out for the low-income family, the person who may be experiencing homelessness, may be experiencing mental illness, and needs a little bit more help.
Yeah, and in the process, that means Maryland's taxpayers too.
It sure does, because we want to make sure that every dollar gets raised in a fair way and gets spent efficiently and effectively.
All right. How can someone get in touch with the Institute?
So the best thing to do, first of all, is to look at our website, which is www.marylandpolicy.org. And you need to spell out the word Maryland, because otherwise you get one of our more conservative competitors' website. And you can also give us a call at 410-767-6367.
Great, thanks. And I know that you're related to the Maryland nonprofits.
Yes, so the Budget and Tax Policy Institute is a project of Maryland nonprofits, which is the trade association for the nonprofit community statewide.
And so they, you're a division?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, great, great. So we're talking really to both today.
Sure.
In a manner of speaking. Let's talk about Maryland's budget process. I first wanted to, and one of the many reasons why I wanted to have you on was to help people understand a little bit more about the budget process. They don't quite, I think people hear about the budget process when they're in elementary school or maybe middle school, And, you know, they've well forgotten, and they're just existing on stereotypes, I guess, by the time they get to be adults and actually voting on things that affect it. So please tell us.
And I talk to executive directors of organizations and journalists and sometimes even elected officials who don't have a real good understanding of the budget process also. So
that's good.
People shouldn't feel dumb about that. If you're not working with it every day, there's no reason for you to be up on the details.
Well, and that's good, because then you have a job, right?
That's exactly right. I don't want everyone else to know everything I know, or else why would I be here? You know, if you're going to only know two things about Maryland's budget process, these are the two things you want to know. One is that the budget has to be balanced. That means that we can't plan a budget that we know is going to run a deficit, that's going to run out of money before the end of the year. And secondly, in Maryland, the legislature cannot add to the budget the governor proposes. So every January, the governor proposes a budget. The legislature spends 10 or 12 weeks looking at that budget. They can agree with an item in the governor's budget. They can cut it. They can restrict how the Department of Transportation or the Department of Health or whatever it is going to use that money, but they can't say, we don't think the governor's put in enough, so we're going to add more.
So at the end of the day, then, it's really up to the governor to make up any shortfall by making another proposal?
Sure. So what happens is the governor proposes a balanced budget in January. He may suggest ways of balancing that budget that require the legislature to take some other action, like raising a tax or transferring money from some other fund in government into the general fund to help balance the budget, or something else, altering a formula that's in statute. So if the legislature does not want to go along with the governor's proposal, it has to find some other way to balance the budget, either by cutting spending or raising revenue. Now, we talk all the time about cutting spending and how the state should live within its means just like our families have to.
Right.
And when we just say state spending, that sounds real obvious, but we need to think about what that state spending really is. Most of the money the state spends is for education, health care, and public safety.
So education, health care, and public safety, which means schools, which means hospitals,
right. So if we're going to cut the budget to live within our means, that means that we're going to sacrifice something in our local schools. We're going to have larger class sizes, or we're going to have fewer electives. And we met this past year a chemistry teacher in Montgomery County. Her name was Virginia. And she was explaining how in her classes, the class sizes have gradually gotten higher and higher. So now she has more kids than she has stations in her lab. She has more kids in her classes than she can really remember the names. So she really feels like she's not delivering the same quality of education, the same level of contact with her students that she was able to 3 or 4 years ago before some of these budget cuts.
And that's one of the repercussions of these cuts.
Yeah. Yes. And then we think about higher education. We know that students are struggling to afford tuition and fees. We know that many students are taking on really unmanageable levels of debt when they graduate. So if we cut higher education, we're going to see tuition increases, not 3 or 4%, which are hard enough for students and families to handle, but we're going to see 10, 12, 15% tuition increases. And, that's just harming our own future, because we need college-educated kids coming into the workforce because the jobs of the 21st century require a college education.
That's true. That's true. That's true. The impact of these budgetary decisions then is something that the Institute, that you folks, analyze and communicate to the legislators before they vote on these things. That's part of what you folks do?
Yeah, so we try to look at the big picture numbers and be able to explain in plain English to people who read our reports or hear our presentations what's in the budget and how it's balanced. But increasingly, we're finding that the effective way to communicate is also to find human stories about this chemistry teacher, Virginia, that I was talking about, or about a young woman in Baltimore City named Tracy, who grew up in a bad neighborhood, got involved in crime and drugs, but then she got arrested and wound up in drug court, and a judge referred her to a treatment program with some counseling and some life skills coaching that worked for her. And now she has a job and she's doing well. And that was possible because someone put money in a budget for those services.
And therefore enabling her to turn her life around and become, rather than a ward of the state, someone who contributes money.
Sure. So a lot of this state spending that we're hearing we should cut to live within our means are really investments that are able to help people regain their independence and become productive, contributing members of our state. And so that's going to pay us dividends in the long run.
Yeah, indeed. And I guess part of what the Institute does is analyze a particular, say, education, as long as we're on that, to identify the areas that it really does make a difference to put the money into, as opposed to not.
Sure.
In other words, I'm responding to I'm sure our viewers who would say, well, there's got to be areas that could be cut too.
And absolutely there are. Now the O'Malley administration has put a lot of effort into evaluating performance, into his state stat process, where he brings leaders of state government in front of a group of evaluators every 2 weeks and runs them through a mill to go through all their performance statistics and find out what they're doing well and where they need more attention. So that kind of thing helps us to spend our state dollars more effectively. But there have been billions and billions of dollars in cuts to state programs since the Great Recession started in 2007.
That's true.
And a lot of those have been possible through efficiencies, through reorganizing, through making use of technology. So the taxpayers are getting more value for their dollar.
So this is from the person, for our viewers here that are watching, they should definitely feel better that it seems that the governor has a process that is making sure that the money is spent in an effective way and in a cost effective as well as end productive way.
Yes, I think that's right. There's more attention than ever on using our dollars effectively and efficiently.
That's a good
But
thing.
I gotta say that most of those billions of cuts come at the cost of reduced services. There's only so much you can do by increasing efficiency.
Right. At some point, you're cutting bone.
That's right, and we're well past that point now.
Let's talk about some of those trends, because you've been in the middle of these budget fights. Sounds like for 20 years.
Oh gosh.
Best part.
You have to remind me of that.
Sorry. My wife doesn't like that kind of thing that I say either. But pressing on, you've seen trends, And the trend now, as you say, is into the bone. In what areas specifically is Maryland starting to, or is Maryland continuing a path of cutting into the bone?
So we have cut back on the spending we make by providing aid to local schools. The total dollar amounts have not gone down, but what the state's paying to local school systems is not keeping up with costs and is not keeping up with enrollment.
I guess that would include, and my wife, who's a teacher, wanted me to make sure to ask you, so you know how that goes. That would include the proposed decreases in pension contributions.
Sure. So what the state is undertaking starting next year is to shift some of the cost of teacher pensions from the state budget to local budgets. So that doesn't save costs overall. Mm-hmm. The state changed the retirement benefits last year, and that saved the state some money.
But this would just mean that the localities would have to pay.
Right. So this makes the state balance sheet better, but puts that same burden on Baltimore City and Baltimore County and Anne Arundel County and Garrett County and the other local governments around the state.
I guess that's what a lot of state governments have been doing, like California has been doing a lot of that in order to balance their state budgets.
Sure,
they shift things, and so then the local counties then have to raise their property taxes.
That's right. So there's a saying in government that stuff runs downhill. We don't always say stuff. So the state is able to sometimes pass its problems down to the county government. And so this pension switch is part of that. And people may not realize this, but since the beginning of the Great Recession, the state has cut back 90% on the transportation aid it provides to counties and municipalities.
90%?
90%. So they only have 10% left of the money that they need to maintain roads, fill potholes, repair sidewalks, run local bus services.
So that means for our viewer, they are seeing less and less repairs on the road.
I would say if you have a pothole on your street, get to know it and make friends with it. It might be there a while.
Yeah, I got a couple in my neighborhood that have been there for a while. Yeah, and so there's a longer time to get to those potholes, and I guess a longer time to resurface or to reconstruct some of our more major connector roads.
And even things like repairing cracks in the sidewalk are going to take long. It's a small thing, but it's important if you have an elderly parent who walks that sidewalk.
Yeah. Or if you've got depending on what your back is, driving over these potholes.
Yeah,
and these
that's when and you're going to see it in your repair bill too, because you're going to have to get your wheels aligned more often.
Right, and the whole thing balanced. That's right. These are trickle down things here, right? But they're direct costs that we as taxpayers and as citizens of the state are directly affected by these things.
But I don't want to be a constant downer, though. The state is able to do some good things even in these tough times, and an example is providing funding for school breakfast programs. The governor and the legislature found some funding to expand the program that provides in-classroom breakfast in schools that have a high proportion of needy kids. Mm-hmm. And you know what? If you're not hungry, you learn better, you're better behaved, and you have a better attitude about school. So that's another investment that is going to provide us dividends down the road.
Yeah. Is it I've always thought of a lot of the discussions over budgets a lot of the debates over budgets, a conflict between short-term and long-term effects.
And that's true. And I said that the first thing to remember is that the budget has to be balanced, and it has to be balanced at the end of the year.
Right.
So we have a constitutional requirement that says look at 12 months of finances. So where we have a program like the school breakfast program or like drug treatment that's going to help Maryland's economy and save money in the long run, we don't get credit for that this year. We have to be forward-thinking enough to find a way to fund that now, knowing that it'll pay for itself over time, but over time may be many years. It'll be beyond this year's budget horizon.
I wonder if that's one of the problems that we have politically with a lot of these programs. For example, of drug treatment programs and various programs in the prisons, that we're so focused on 6 months ahead, on the next 6 months, that we're ignoring the fact that, as you've said, by investing in a breakfast program today, you can potentially improve high school graduation rates in 15 years.
That's exactly right. I don't think the answer is to change the rules, though, because it's important that we balance the budget every year.
Yeah.
But I think the way to handle that is for people to speak to their representatives in the legislature, speak to the governor, and make it known that they appreciate these investments, they support them, and they're willing to pay a little bit now so that we get benefits next year and the year after that and the decade after that.
Yeah, I guess so. Part of the process then that I know that you must be involved in every session in Annapolis is to educate people as to what the impacts and, of course, costs are of budgetary decisions that are done in the short run.
Sure. So, taxes are always a controversial subject. Where I've done it, I've said the T word.
Yeah. You've got people's attention now.
We don't always connect the tax bills we pay with the way our government spends that funding on our behalf. So the fact is, when we send in our tax checks, when we pay our sales tax at the cash register, that money goes to Annapolis, and they do not bury it in a hole in the State House lawn. They use it, and they use it mostly, as we said, for education and health care. And it turns out that these things are very important to the quality of life in Maryland today and our prospects for a prosperous economic future for everyone in the state in the coming years. So, and again, I'm not going to sit here and claim to you that every last dollar is spent with perfect wisdom and efficiency. It isn't, but they're getting better at that every year. And most of it is used in ways that help Marylanders today and help build Maryland's economy in the long run. When there's a screw up and a scandal, it gets a lot of attention.
Right.
But the billions upon billions of dollars that are spent appropriately and wisely every year just happen, and no one notices that.
Amen. Amen. And that's something that we really should remember as taxpayers, that the media and just our natural inclination to be outraged when a dollar is misspent is put out of proportion. We've only got a couple minutes left, Neil, and I wanted to ask you, what can our viewers do to help? I mean, you've in the last number of minutes, you've very, very effectively underlined the fact that we need to look at these budgetary decisions in a different way and to make sure that we understand that when we talk about state dollars and talk about our tax dollars, we're talking about things that directly affect people's lives in a positive or a negative way. What can people do to help?
Well, you know, our state government is very responsive. Not a lot of people email or call or write their legislators or the governors. So if you do that, it gets noticed. So whatever you care about, whether it's class offerings in public schools, whether it's higher ed tuition, whether it's the availability of drug treatment funding, whether it's rental housing assistance programs, if you just send an email to your legislator telling them that, it'll get noticed. And if you get 10 of your friends to send the same sort of email, you know, inside a legislative office in Annapolis, that looks like a tidal wave. There just isn't
that
much constituent communication that they get on specific issues other than from the organized interests with paid lobbyists.
So the message then for our viewers is, if you care about something, put your email where your mouth is.
If you take 10 minutes to send an email, it will get noticed, it will make a difference.
But make sure it's from your personal email account and not from where you work.
Well, make sure that you're sending it to your legislator and that you say that you're a resident of district number, whatever it is.
Right. Does it make sense to send an email to a non-district legislator?
Yeah, it does, but they all put their own district as top priority.
Right, right. So, but get involved. That's the point.
Absolutely. You know, you have elected representatives, and they are ready to listen to you.
How can somebody find out more information, again, about the Institute?
So once again, www.marylandpolicy.org. Spell out the word Maryland.
And if they want to call?
410-767, oh my goodness.
Yeah, they'll have it on the board.
6367. It'll go up on the screen.
Yeah, it'll be up on the screen. That's okay. That's okay. Great, great, wonderful. We've just about out of time, Neil. I need to thank you so much for spending some time with us today, and keep up your good work for all of us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank you. For Neighborhood Beat, that's all we have time for today. I want to thank our guest, Mr. Neil Bergsman, who is director of the Maryland Budget and Policy Tax Institute, and Tax Policy Institute, I'm sorry, for being our guest. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
Good luck with the sharks out there and protecting the public's interests. I want to thank you for tuning in, viewers. Let's try to be a good neighbor out there in all of our neighborhoods, and we'll see you next time.